Hi team, Lida here from Solace, just making a quick video to have a chat around a very popular topic in the gym and in the nutrition space around weight and the weighing scale. And in today's kind of video, I want to discuss why I don't like using the weighing scale as a primary and sole data point. So you'll notice that when we run various challenges in the gym and when we talk around health and wellness with our members, while we mention weight and we allow for it, we don't necessarily recognize it with points or with much credit other than just an additional data point. And so today I want to get into why that is and talk to you around a couple of certain important points to really consider. Again, if this video is triggering in any way, and if weighing yourself is not something that's a focus for you right now, feel free to skip ahead. This isn't necessarily for you, but if you are somebody that has in the past or is interested in learning more around this, then stay tuned and let's get into it. So as a starting point, a couple of obvious reasons why I don't like the scale. So as the first point to mark is that the scale doesn't differentiate for your body composition. So the number that you see is just giving you a blanket number, but it's not telling you your body fat, your mass, your muscle mass, your water, the amount of water on your body, the bone density, etc. It's literally giving you a figure, and somebody weighing the same amount can look very different because of that. So both individuals weighing in at 70 kilos can look incredibly different in terms of not only their genetic differences. So obviously every individual is going to be slightly different, have slightly different torso sizes, arm length, leg length, etc. There's that unique element, but from a body composition standpoint, the same weight isn't going to show the same thing. And it's not giving you, that breakdown. As a second point, your weight does not give you an indication of your health. So while at the two extremes of someone who's very obese or someone who's very underweight, yes, we can correlate weight to health. In that middle patch, it becomes very difficult, and it's not, there's also a point of diminishing returns. So, weighing 60 kilos doesn't mean that you're unhealthy or that you're healthy, and weighing 100 kilos doesn't necessarily mean that you're unhealthy. And again, the other side of it is, so I mentioned the diminishing returns, is that if you have a very specific goal in mind, there is a point where health has to be sacrificed. And that's up to you to decide. It goes the same for performance. Elite athletes sacrifice certain markers of health in order to perform at that level. And that's just fact. So again, this kind of also leads into the fact that, okay, we don't account for body composition. We don't account for the health marker by using that weight on its own. The other side of it is that your weight can fluctuate, and it can do so up to within the space of one day and just over 24 to 48 hours in general, depending on a couple of different things. And this is unique to each individual. But generally speaking, things like just what you ate or drank that day, especially, for example, if you ate out or ate a processed meal that's high in sodium or high in salt content, that can really impact on you retaining more water and as a result, holding on to a bit more weight. Similarly, if you eat carbohydrates or a very high amount of carbohydrates in your meals for that specific day, if you have poor quality sleep or suffering from a high amount of stress, that can contribute to water retention or just weight retention. If it's the time of the month, so specifically for women on your period, you can often gain quite a substantial or quite a notable amount of weight. And again, all of this can contribute to the emotional baggage that comes with focusing on weight. And this is the piece that really puts me off talking around weight with people or focusing too much on it, especially when I work with clients one-on-one, because of that emotional aspect and getting fixated on that number on the scale, which almost puts these blinders on that you don't notice all the other positive things that are happening. So again, for example, when I used to be obsessed with this and focus on this a lot, I used to have different weighing scales in the house, and I would use one specific weighing scale because it would tell me a slightly nicer number, which already tells you that this is a really bad relationship that I had with the scale. The other side of it is that, again, often people will come in and say, oh, I'll be happy when I weigh X amount, or when I reach this weight, or when I lose this amount of weight. And the reality is that that number has been plucked either out of the sky based on something that someone has read or seen, or perhaps because they weighed or looked a certain way, or weighed that specific amount at a certain point in their past. And that person is associating being happy at that weight and thinking that if they can get back to that, then magically their life and everything else will just fall into place, which sadly is just never the case. I speak from personal experience and from seeing other people go through this. Usually what happens is that you reach that point and you're incredibly drained, you're lacking energy, and you're fed up, or you start to obsess about losing more. And that can be a very difficult kind of pill, or thing to swallow when you get to that point, because it's fixating on a number and letting that number define you, and it really doesn't. So again, the other side of it is that if somebody says to me that they want to reach a certain weight and they want to, I'll be happy when I reach 65 kilos, my initial thought is, what's wrong with 66 kilos? And why is there a problem with 66, but there's no problem with 65? Because it's a 2 pound difference, or it's a 1 kilo difference. And also then the other side of it is the sacrifice that comes with that. Depending on how fast you want to get there and how you get there, there can be huge sacrifices made that are very difficult to come back from. So for example, what happens if you reach that 65 kilos and that's your magic weight and magic number, but you're not performing in the gym? Your PBs are, long gone. You're not lifting as heavy as you were. Your energy is totally drained. So you're coming, in the bottom of the workouts. Your energy is totally down. You're struggling to focus at work. You're, a nightmare at home because you're constantly having ups and downs with moods. Your sleep quality is crap. What happens then? What are you going to do about it? Because coming back from that is naturally to increase your food intake and start to gain weight to get some of that energy back. And that's something that people don't think about, because that happened to me. So I reached a point where I was incredibly at a very unhealthy weight, and I could barely lift 40 kilos in the gym, and I was crying my eyes out most days because I was so frustrated. And that was a huge turning point for me. I really switched my mindset at that point. And this is something, again, that we see kind of coming back on that a little bit. When people want to reach a certain weight, they also start to develop really poor behaviors, whether they unconsciously or subconsciously do so. So for example, if they lose a certain amount of weight that week, they start to reward themselves, or vice versa. If the weight scale doesn't shift or it goes up, they punish themselves by eating a little bit less or skipping a meal. And that can be really bad. It's a really bad habit to get into, whether you notice it or not, and it's very difficult to get out of as well. Especially as well if you don't see the scale move for a couple of weeks. We see this all the time too in the gym. People get really frustrated and disheartened because they're not noticing all the other positive things that are happening. They're just focusing on a number and letting that number define them, and it's affecting their mood day to day, and can also lead them to give up at a certain point, which is something that we really don't want to happen. So going back to my example, where my turning point of, I started to become so frustrated, I decided it's not worth it to weigh this little and nothing else. I can't socialize with friends without, making a lot of sacrifice. I can't perform in the gym, which was a huge aspect of my life. And very important to me. My mood is crap. I'm constantly in a terrible mood, and people around me are really affected by that. So I started to make a lot of changes, and this goes to my tips that I want to give you. So number one is recognizing in general, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We don't do fast fixes here. It will never be something we preach at Solas. It's a long-term road, no matter what. And I'm here to support you on that, but I will never stand over doing a fad diet or getting a quick fix or cutting foods drastically and so on. But the other things that I did, so in terms of weight, and you'll see this again. So like I said, in various challenges that we do, we recognize weight and using the weighing scale, but it's just one additional data point. And usually it comes alongside other data points that we place a lot more value on. So myself, I started to look at taking photographs using the tape measure and running body fat tests in order to track my progress alongside weight. So I still collected my weight, but used that as data points to review over time and see patterns of ups and downs and try and identify correlations of, you know, what I was going through in my life, or was I eating certain foods at that point, which is what contributed to me gaining a bit of weight, losing a bit of weight, and so on. With my pictures, tape measurements, and body fats, I started to see other positive things. So, for example, my body composition changing visibly, clothes fitting better, but also from a body fat testing perspective, the DEXA scan gives you your bone density. My bone density came back as off the charts for my, gender, age range, and so on. In fact, the team in UCD at the time were incredibly impressed because I was way off the scale in terms of what good looked like. I was beyond optimal. And that's fantastic to see that, you know, that CrossFit is having that benefit on me and training at Solus. The other thing is that I changed my mindset to focusing away from body composition and scale, you know, whatever physique, body fat percentage or whatever I'd wanted in the past. I focused to a performance goal. So I started to look at, okay, how can I lift more in the gym? How can I perform better in workouts, so get a faster Fran time or what have you? And also I looked at a lot of body weight goals. So how can I get 10 unbroken pull-ups, 20 unbroken push-ups? And essentially I recognized that in doing so, my body has to look a certain way. So to allow me to do 20 unbroken push-ups, I have to have a certain amount of muscle mass. I have to look a certain way to do so. So it helped me to start to focus on my performance and not let that number on the scale dictate my mood every day. Instead, I got excited for training and that I was making progress in the gym. And my body just changed automatically in the background. The other piece is that I started to focus on eating more. So this is something that's very difficult to get out of, especially for females, because we're so brainwashed with this diet in the media and dieting, and, you know, the idea of to weigh less, you need to eat less. And that's not necessarily the case, especially when you look at body composition changes and adding muscle mass. So, you know, we hear this other thought as well that muscle weighs more than fat. Well, the reality is that a pound of muscle weighs the same as a pound of fat, but fat takes up nearly twice as much space as muscle does. And muscle is a lot more denser than fat, which is again why fat takes up much more space. So I started to focus on gaining as much muscle as I could and really focusing in on that, both from a training and nutrition perspective. And the other piece of it is that muscle requires more energy on your body than fat. So generally speaking, when you carry more muscle mass, you can eat more because you have a faster metabolism. So again, to sustain my energy, to sustain my performance output, I started to look at not how little I can eat in order to lose weight, but how can I eat the most that I possibly can and sustain or improve my physique. And to give you that example, I weigh the same as I did, 8 years ago, but right now I'm eating almost 1,500 more calories than I was back then. And I'm maintaining the same amount of weight because I have more muscle mass on my body, even though I weigh the same. So yeah, so to finish up, just to quickly summarize. So the reality is that the weighing scale does not distinguish your body composition. So that number doesn't reflect how you look. It also doesn't indicate, it's not an indicator of your health. Your weight can fluctuate dramatically day to day, throughout the day and week to week. So tracking it over time is incredibly important. And there's a lot more small factors that can really impact your weight and scale changing, which can be very disheartening. The other piece around the emotional baggage that comes with tracking only your weight and how negative that can be to you reaching your goals. Because at the end of the day, if you're fixated on that number, you start to zone out of everything else. So if you are going to use it as a data point alongside other things. So taking pictures, measurements, tape measures, and even body fat testing. I also highly, highly encourage you to journal. To recognize PBs, to recognize when you have a good day with mood, energy, etc. And also to remember, and also I'd highly, highly encourage you to switch your mindset and start looking to performance goals and also fueling for that performance. I hope this video has been useful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment or send me an email.